Hi, I'm Michelle from Michelle's Romantic Tangle, and this video is to explain some techniques for a shawl that I'm talking about over on my blog. If you're not interested in shawl knitting, you can skip this one. I wanted to put a bit of an introduction to what this video is so it wasn't just a disjointed bit of knitting. This is the shawl. It is knit from a yarn called Loops and Threads Chameleon, which was apparently discontinued about 30 seconds after I bought the yarn. If I'd known I was going to write a pattern, I would have tried for yarn that wasn't discontinued, but this was kind of an accidental shawl. My daughter saw the yarn while we were out Christmas shopping and thought it would make a nice looking shawl, which was a hint. So I started following a pattern I found on Ravelry. I got the shawl about halfway done and I knit the wrong row of the lace pattern and there was no salvaging it. I didn't want to knit that whole thing again, not knowing where I went wrong or if I could do it right the next time. So I started a different pattern. I got about 10 rows into that, and then I realized I really didn't like what the designer had done. There wasn't anything wrong with it, it just wasn't the vision I was having for this yarn. So I did my own thing, which is good in a couple of ways. I really love the shawl, the way it came out, and it's my own thing, so I can share the pattern with you and the instructions for how to do it. So the first thing I'm going to talk about, the shawl took one skein of the Loops and Threads Chameleon. It's about 437 yards of a worsted or Aran weight yarn. The yarn comes in, this is not Chameleon, it's a different Loops and Thread. It's a great big foofy skein, and it's a hassle to knit from a big skein like this. After my mishap with the first version of the shawl, I unraveled everything and rolled it into a great big ball, and the knitting after I did that was much, much easier. Another thing about this yarn, it is sticky. It is hard to unravel, and once you unravel it, because a lot of it is 2 plies of color lightly twisted together, so it gets splitty, and it is splittier the second time around. All in all, it's an inexpensive yarn. It made a gorgeous shawl. I'd knit with it again if I had more, but I don't. So the first thing I want to talk about here is the tab start for the shawl. I am using some vintage nylon circulars. I am not sure what size these are. I'm thinking they're at least an 8 or a 9. I don't worry too much about gauge when I'm shawl knitting. I just do what gives me the drape that I'd like to have. This shawl starts with a tab construction, which is the whole reason I'm doing the video. You're supposed to use a provisional cast on for this. I don't know how to do a provisional cast on. It's one of the things I have not been able to figure out in 15 years of knitting. For some projects, that provisional cast on lets you do absolute magic. For this, if you know how to do it, but if you don't lose sleep over it, because it's just 3 stitches. So cast on 3 stitches however you want. I do a backwards loop cast on because it's easy. And you're going to knit these 3 stitches. You're going to knit every row for 10 rows. So knit 3 stitches, that's row 1. Knit your 3 stitches, that's row 2. So now we have our 10 rows of garter stitch knit on each row. And what we're going to do is a little fiddly. You have 3 live stitches on your needle. You're going to take your left needle, you're going to pick up a stitch along the edge, and you're going to knit it. So you're just picking up your selvage stitches. And this doesn't have to be perfect, you just need to get the right number of stitches. And we need 8 of them. I have knit into 2 stitches to get my 8 stitches. I have done an increase to make it work right. I'm not entering my shawls into the state fair or a knitting competition. And this is such a tiny, tiny part of the actual finished shawl that I don't worry about it too much. I do what I can to make it right, and sometimes it's better than others. So you're going to pick up and knit stitches, so you have the 3 stitches you started with. Actually, I'm going to correct myself and say pick up 6 stitches. Then if you did your provisional cast on, this is where you would unzip it and pick up those 3 stitches. Like I said, I don't do the provisional cast on, so I am just going to pick up 3 stitches from this end and knit them onto my needle. And now I'm ready to go. I'm ready to actually start my shawl. That last stitch is a little tight, but it'll work out. So what we are going to do here for this project, I strongly, strongly recommend you use stitch markers. I leave stitch markers off a lot, but on this one they were a lifesaver. So I am going to knit 2 stitches. I'm going to place a marker. I'm going to think about my math for a second. I'm going to knit 3 more stitches. I'm going to place a marker. Two more stitches. Place a marker. Three more stitches. Place a marker. And the last 2 stitches. This is sort of a tab start. It's not the picture perfect best of the best, but from what I've done with other shawls, it'll work. And like I said, I don't look at the nape of my neck on my shawls. No one has ever come up behind me and looked at the nape of my neck on my shawls. As soon as I say that, someone will do it. Probably my daughter. Honey, yours doesn't have the tab cast on, and that's why I'm telling everybody else to do it, because yours is wonky. So we are now going to start building our shawl in garter stitch. Slip the first stitch and then knit the second one and slip your marker. These 2 stitches and the last 2 stitches are going to be the border edges that go all the way around your scarf. And these stitches from that original rectangle you knitted are going to make that a continuous border, and it'll look really nice. Now we're going to make a stitch by reaching down under the bar here and knitting it. We're going to knit to the marker. We're going to make a second stitch, slip the marker, knit the 2 center stitches, slip the marker, make a stitch, knit to the marker, make a stitch by knitting under that bar, slip the marker, and knit the last 2 stitches. That was our right side row. Please do something to mark it so you can remember which is the right side and which is the wrong side, because we are only increasing on the right side row. Turn for the wrong side row for this garter stitch section. You're going to slip the first stitch, knit the second stitch, slip your stitch marker, knit to the next stitch marker, slip that marker, knit these 2 center stitches. Every time we hit these 2 center stitches, right side or wrong side, we're going to knit them so we have a garter bar going up the center of the shawl. Slip the stitch marker, knit to the next stitch marker, that last stitch marker and then knit the next 2. Then turn your work back on the right side, and you're going to go through making those 4 increases again. The increases are what provide the shaping for your shawl. You increase only on the right side row, and the stitch patterns that I've used for the shawl are all multiples of 2 stitches. So increasing in pattern can be really hard. Increasing in this lace pattern, the seed stitch pattern, and the garter stitch, if you slip and miss an increase or add an increase where you shouldn't have added, as long as there aren't too many of those, it's going to work out fine. These are very, very forgiving stitch patterns. And I made a lot of mistakes counting along the way. And I'm really happy with the way this turned out. I've got alternating bands of garter stitch and lace and seed stitch. I'll put some still pictures up on the blog so you can get a better look at it. Yeah, this was a fun knit. It was a quick knit. It took me, I think, a little over a week, and used up almost the whole skein of yarn, which, if you have a skein of Loops and Threads Chameleon, will be really helpful to know. If you don't have a skein of Loops and Threads Chameleon, 2 skeins of woolies, about 430 or so yards, will make a shawl. To find the full instructions for the shawl and all the other stitch patterns involved, I'll put the link to my blog down in the description. And like I said, this video was mainly to show how to make that tab, since I thought I could do it better as a video than I could writing out the directions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next week with a floss tube video.